Michelle, did your mom know about your abuse?
Not That's questionable, right? But no, not knowingly until much later.
That is such a heavy burden for you to
Oof.
carry.
My oldest son passed away 3 years
Oh,
ago.
Oh,
I'm
Michelle, I'm so sorry.
sorry.
To find out what happened, keep watching.
Hi,
Hey,
Louise.
hi, Sarah. Here we are at chapter 22, the online
Yeah, I'm,
adoption market.
uh, yep, the adoption paradigm. This is
Depressing.
very depressing
This is like,
chapter. The online adoption, first of all, market itself,
yep,
and equating that with adoption is just troubling out the gate, right?
yeah. And it starts with the quote from Joyce McGuire Pavo, who's amazing in our community.
Mhm.
Dr. Joyce, she goes by. If adoption were truly child centered, about finding families for children, we would be working very hard to prevent attachment problems and to provide transitions that are kind and loving for the infant or child. That's what we would be doing.
Well,
And
I thought
we
this
are.
was really
Mhm.
this is a super dense chapter, so we're basically just going to do the Cliffs Notes
Yeah.
version of it
Yeah.
and urge you to read it. But this is no other country has created such a vast and organized online marketplace as the US, and our rates of adoption are significantly higher than the rest of the world. Prospective couples or individuals who have signed with an agency are advertising themselves to an expectant parent on websites in an online marketplace.
Yeah.
That is so disturbing to me. And she goes through
Yeah. The other countries,
the
which is
other
great.
countries.
But
Yeah. The
yeah,
UK, it's not private adoption, not legal. Australia, open adoptions are the only
only
type
type.
allowed. In Germany, only the guardianship court may declare an adoption, and agencies are the ones who connect the child and prospective adoptive parents. And
That's
this was,
surprising to me. Yeah.
I know, and I thought this was super interesting. One large area not mentioned are countries dominated by the Islamic faith. That's because adoption, as it is conducted in the West, is forbidden.
Yeah.
Orphans are taken in, and this is encouraged via a system of guardianship, or as it is called, sponsorship. But contained within Islam is the tenet that a child's surname remains part of their identity.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
They want you to know who your family is.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so funny because we always think we're the most progressive country. We're really also the most capitalistic country. And this
A
is
100%. Yeah.
truly, truly about, people want what they want. They want a baby and they'll go in the market.
And
Yeah.
now, now now there's people who forego agencies and attorneys and
Yes.
go right to social
A market.
media
Yeah.
and
That's kind of
start,
what she gets into because
yeah.
she does get into private adoptions, open adoptions, and state-run adoptions, and through attorneys and agencies, state-run, then private. So we're going to skip that a little because we've talked a little bit about it, but we're going to get into
Mm-hmm.
the social media part because that
Yeah, because it's like when the marketplace fails, right?
fails.
And also there's talk again in this chapter about how often, because some adoptive parents have come on and said, when you're
Yeah.
dealing with infertility and miscarriages and this, and then going right to getting a baby on Instagram or Facebook, or now
Yeah.
there's even like a new app where they
There's an
swipe
app.
like Tinder,
It's so
It's
disgusting.
so I
These are
like we are
children.
commodities.
Yeah.
I mean, really, they're just commodities to fulfill
Yeah.
this idea of, what a family is supposed to be. I don't know. There's so
Yeah.
many layers.
There was before we even get into the social media, there was one reading which just that somebody didn't want, like, a lot of kids go back into foster care. That's one thing I wanted to touch on
Hmm. Well, the
because
rehoming you're talking, or
before rehoming, that get sent back to foster care.
yeah.
Like 66,000. I remember that number. Yeah, 66,000 children get sent back to foster care because their adoptions aren't working out because the parents didn't really think they were up to par. And it was really dumb reasons. One lady didn't want to, she homeschooled and the child can
It,
keep up with the language.
and well, and not just that,
Yeah.
he needed the social.
Yeah.
He liked school. He liked being
Yeah.
around. So, but because of the Christian religion, they homeschooled.
And they sent
God
him
forbid he
back.
be exposed to, any of the real world out there. And he's like, you're not good at this, or whatever it was he said to her.
Yeah.
And they sent him back.
Yeah, to foster care. 66,000 children come back through, though.
Well, I know a famous writer
Yeah.
who had adopted two sisters from Ethiopia, and after a
Yeah.
year returned them, and it was never guaranteed that those sisters would stay together. They'd never been apart.
It's horrible.
Yeah, I've talked about that on here
Yep.
before.
It's upsetting.
And then the really
Really.
awful part of this
Mm.
chapter is the rehoming. And I just want to show this picture,
Yeah.
how they're
Or
advertising these little kids. It's almost like they're, I don't even know how
slavery.
to
I don't even know what to
say
say.
it. I mean, it's, yeah, here, Facebook friends, please help us by sharing this to your Facebook page with the kids they want to rehome. I mean,
Yeah, like I don't want how like most people shouldn't just randomly find people on the internet to be adopting their kids. It's bizarre. Second chance and this
and
is
here, yes,
second chance adoptions. Avoid that place and
it's on Facebook. I was going to go
blow up their
look.
page.
Yes. Here's one advertisement for a boy, a 9.5-year-old boy they were trying to find a home
Love it.
for. And here's the thing that really stuck out to me. He's very compliant and easy to redirect.
Yeah, of course. What does that mean? That's terrifying to even think what that means. People giving
Ugh.
him back or saying this is terrifying.
And there's no oversight on any of that, on any of this.
Nope.
That's the thing. There aren't laws. There aren't
Nope.
there's
Nothing.
no oversight from
Nothing.
states or federal, any place. This
No.
stuff is happening and there's
Yeah.
no oversight. This really is trafficking.
Yeah, she said many of these listings describe situations where the child is acting out, sometimes severely so. Shock there. But these youngsters should be expected to have some adjustment challenges and therefore behavioral struggles. What's devastating to encounter is what appears to be a massive systematic failure on two fronts. One, to accurately manage the expectation of these adopted parents, and two, the lack of truly informed psychological family counseling that should be received by everyone. There again. She said some of these
We could
kids
spend
survive in spite of it, but most have horrific
Oh,
outcomes.
yeah. We could spend hours talking
Yeah.
about this because it's so complex and layered and disturbing. And I don't know. It's just, well, she wraps it up with these are painful situations and must be seen. You just read that, didn't we? A societal failure put into motion by a dreamy fiction sold to adopting parents about what their experiences in family life will become. That love is enough, and any child brought into their care will easily mesh with their existing family.
Nope.
Oh, this kind of thing just
I know.
boils my blood.
Well, and she has tons of resources.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
please read this because it's not like just Jean thought of this and let me interview a few people. The
No,
resources
it's
and the
very,
research.
very researched book.
Yeah, she's
Very.
excellent. And she's going to get a lot of questions on that panel too. I know it.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause-
Yes.
as she
Yes.
should.
Come to Minneapolis, people. Meet Jean, who did so much work to put this book out there, and it's a very important book.
It is.
So, well, on that cheery note, I will see you in a minute for Mishelle.
Which is not a cheery note either. So see you in a minute.
Are there any?
See you in a minute.
See you in a minute. Hello. Today we have someone coming to us from Astoria, Oregon. Welcome, Mishelle.
Thank
Happy
you.
to have you.
Welcome, Mishelle.
Thank you. I'm very excited, a little starstruck. I've been watching you guys, just like you guys literally, I didn't even hear the terms baby scoop
No.
or coming out of the fog or even the books of the primal wound until watching your podcast and came out of the fog, whether you knew it or not, with you here
Right.
watching. So
Well,
I
yeah,
love that.
thank
We
you.
we hear that a lot, and we too didn't know, as you
No.
know. So it was a journey of discovery for all of us.
Well,
Yeah.
and we found something out that you're from the place where Goonies is filmed. So there you go.
I
I
know,
logged
it's
I logged
pretty
in
exciting. Yeah, it's
into that
like
conversation. I'm
we
like,
had
oh,
the 40th anniversary last summer, and it was just crazy. And it's
oh,
just a little tiny town on the
that's so
coast, but
cute.
people were coming from all over and had a lot of Goonies activities. So.
Love that.
But
Well, tell
yeah,
us your story, however you want to start.
so I was born at the end of the baby scoop era, 1972 in Portland, Oregon. And my birth mother was 15.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and she was from a very small town, um, several hours away from Portland, and was sent to a mother home to have, unwed mother home. Um, and relinquished me a week after I was born. And I was in foster care for a few weeks until I was adopted. Um, I was adopted into a family with already had a brother that was 2 years older. He also was adopted. And big Catholic family in Portland. I always knew I was adopted. I don't remember being told. I remember the story that I was told, which until watching your podcast, I'd never challenged that story. And it was like, I don't know why, like it was
Right.
this, when I thought about it, it was like that clearly didn't happen the way the story was told to me. But, I had a very book, storybooks told to me of my brother and my parents, just needed a little girl, and they went to this place and there was a room full of babies, and my brother picked me out, and like never really thought about it beyond that as far as how it took place until this last couple years, but always was very curious as a young child, always was very disconnected, I guess is the word, or always had that very like I'm different, or didn't have the words or the understanding of why I felt that way. Adoption wasn't something that I really looked at as part of the problem ever, um, till recently, as part of the core issues that I was
Uh-huh.
struggling with. It was just, I had brown hair and I was white and I was adopted, and those were the facts. I didn't really challenge any of that, but all the classic issues, um, relationship issues, left home early, dysfunctional family. Um, my brother was in a lot of trouble my whole life. Um,
Mm.
my parents were focused on that. Um, there was abuse from my adopted father. Um,
Towards you or your brother or both?
towards me, sexual abuse,
Mm.
and then towards my brother, like mental abuse. I don't think he ever really, like, the feeling was that he didn't like my brother. Um, was kind of not necessarily like physical abuse, but just a lot of tension there between him and my brother. And my mom was always trying to protect, like my brother, and protect that and handle those issues. And so
Michelle, did your mom know about your abuse?
not, that's questionable, right? But no, not knowingly until much later.
Okay.
That
Um,
is such a heavy burden for you to
Oof.
carry. Just
and I was, for me, it was protecting her. She was protecting my brother. And, we all just kind of survived for a lot of that time. And then I left home early,
how old were you?
16.
Mm.
Um, and I got pregnant and left
Mm.
home. So kind of repeating the cycle, right? Right around the same age that my biological mother was pregnant, I got pregnant. I didn't have this awareness then, but later it's just
Yeah.
weird to me. Ran away, left home, hid it from my family, was really worried about it. And when I left, I wasn't it wasn't a good place. It was a kid leaving home, and so I was gone for a few months, but I wanted to come back because I didn't have options, and it wasn't a good place. And the um, the conditions to come home was an abortion, and
From a
so
Catholic family,
yeah, and don't tell nobody.
right? Yeah.
So it was very much um, another trauma right there.
Mhm.
Didn't even, I mean, for me, until recently, I couldn't even say that out loud that that happened or acknowledge it. Um, and then, you know, um, life goes on. I left home again. Within a year, I left home um, with the same, my boys' father. So, same person that I was pregnant with at 16, left again around 17 and never went back home. So,
Did you stay in touch with
with
them?
my family, yeah. And and then I had my boys, right? So very much those moments of seeing somebody for the first time that looked like me, having that
And
connection.
you
Yeah.
were you
Same.
same you kept
Same.
the second time around you kept
I
the
kept,
kids, and you were
yeah.
how old then?
I was 19 when my first son was born, and it was, my parents wouldn't talk to me. It was but yeah, I left. I never went back to him, but I didn't have contact at that time with them, but I did shortly after we reconciled. Um, I had two boys, got married, had two boys, um, was living my life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I always was curious. It was always something I wanted to find my biological family, but I was always trying to just survive in whatever I was dealing with
Yeah.
for much of my younger years.
Mm-hmm. Were you told that your mother was so young when you said you figured
I
out
did
every?
know she
Oh, you
was
did.
young. What I knew growing up was that they were young and they weren't going to be able to provide for me, and that for a while they were considering whether the parents, like the grandparents, would take me. But they really just wanted me to go to a Catholic home, and so they
Mm-hmm.
put me up for adoption. That was the story I was told. Um,
You were with her for a week.
yeah, I was
Oh,
with her for a week.
okay.
Um, at least I believe I was. I've just recently, after watching your shows and coming out of the fog, started requesting more of my paperwork and
Yeah.
uncovered some more details. But I was in a hospital with her for a week and then released to an adoption agency,
Okay.
relinquished, and then
Yeah.
went to foster care until my parents got me.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
so you go on, you get married, you have your kids, you start getting curious.
Yeah, and didn't really have any sort of um, conversations with my family about it really at that time. It was something I was always told, if you ever curious, let us know. But it was also very much uh, not talk about feeling at the same time. It wasn't something I felt comfortable bringing up.
Was it a private adoption, or did they have
Yeah.
It was
names and
closed. They
okay.
didn't know, as far as I know. And um, in 1998 or around then, Oregon law changed for we can get our original birth certificates. And that's when I was able to kind of hone in on like trying to find somebody or get any information. But I did that very much on my own. I didn't do that with
Parents.
anyone knowing really. Um, but before that, um, um, my boys were 2 and 4, and their dads was dealing with a lot of mental health issues and ended up committing suicide. And so the boys and I
Yeah.
were kind of thrown into this whole different life of just trying to pick up the pieces and move on. And at that time, my parents wanted me to come and live with them. And like they came, and like it was like within the week of him dying, everyone was there to try and support. We were, getting a funeral together and trying to just make sense of the world. And my parents came and wanted to swoop in and like take care of us, right? And at that point in my life, the only person who knew about the abuse from my dad was my boys' dad.
Oh,
And I would never bring my kids into that, right?
Right.
right.
I would never bring them into that. And so there was this moment of confrontation of that was not going to happen.
Right.
Um, and that's when really everything changed was um, it was I don't even know all that happened, but in all those emotions of what we were dealing with, the conflict with my family, of me not agreeing with them, it was like they were giving me ultimatums, and I didn't choose them, right?
Right.
In that process, it all came out of the abuse. My mother, I told my mom, I told everyone, and that is why I won't be bringing my family into this home and never would, right? And so that opened up a lot of trauma. My mom left my dad
Oh,
and she moved in with me and my boys. And so we were all just trying to, you know, s- work through all that for a few years. And then she eventually got stable and moved back. She lived in Washington. Um, and so I know that's a lot of trauma, but like
yeah.
it leads up to kind of how we all got here. And so a lot of the time, I never knew what trauma I was dealing with. Adoption wasn't the one that I was looking at,
Right.
right? Like I had all these other
Mm-hmm.
things I was dealing with and trying to figure out how to like heal um
Did you and your
and
mom have any of those conversations during those years she was with you and the boys? Of like,
nothing.
was she a good grandmother and good to you during that time?
Yeah, my mom lives in, I used to always say, even as a kid, that she lived in like utopia.
Yeah.
She's sweet. She was, she provided the meals. She was kind and loving.
Yeah.
But to have any sort of hard conversations,
That's
that
not
was
happening.
just not something that we could do. I
But she
knew that
believed you about the abuse, which is
she believed me about the
huge.
abuse and she left. Um, and she left. But it, like, years later, looking back, there was a lot of things that make me believe that she should have known you earlier.
Yeah.
Mm.
A lot of things came out when that abuse came out, like right away. Her sister, my aunt, her younger sister, um, told me how he abused her when she was a
Mm.
minor. His family had stories about abuse when he
Oh,
was, so all this wasn't like a big secret to. And
Also,
then
it speaks volumes to the lack of vetting with
right.
adoption agencies. What they do, a couple of home visits, and then that's it.
none. I don't
Sayonara, we'll
even
never
think
see
they
you
did
again. And
that. I don't
No.
even think they did that, right? Um, yeah.
Mm, yeah.
So coming out of the fog brought up a lot of anger around a lot of it, right? Because I was so blind to, um,
how did you get though from that point in 1998 when you got your birth certificate to then coming out of the fog and all of
mm,
that? Did you go through, did you try to do a search at that point when
Mm,
you got your
yeah.
birth certificate?
So I got my birth certificate. It had my mother's name on it. It didn't have anything for a father. No name. I had the town that she was from. Um, and it was a really small town. And because of that, I was just, our private, like you guys have talked about, being a
yeah.
private investigator just kicked in. Like internet was very new. It wasn't, it was at the very beginning of being able to search, but I remember finding her name on a genealogy page in their county. Like they had some sort of genealogy history, and I found her name, and I knew that I was able to find her because she was married, so she wasn't going by the same name, right? And so once I knew that, it was super easy to track her down. I wrote her a letter. Um, and didn't hear anything. And so I don't know how much time went on. It felt like forever.
Yeah.
I had my friend call her and ask her if it was the right person or not, and if she wanted to talk to me. And she confirmed she was the right person and that she did not want to have contact. In my letter, I was, at the time, I wish I had a copy of it to just see how blind I was to the silly questions and, what was important at the time. But I was, I remember feeling like everyone was so worried about how devastating that was going to be to me, but I was so disconnected, so like, oh, it's just another wall. It's just another wall coming up of like, I didn't really process at the time. It was like, okay, I know who she is. I know where she is. I knew that she had kids. I knew she was married. And I was like, that's more than I've ever known. And I felt grateful.
Yeah.
And that was all I just figured I wouldn't know anything else ever. I
Right.
didn't know who the dad was. She didn't want contact, and I respected that. And I always had the insight of being very concerned about her trauma that she went through, um, and not wanting to make that worse. Um,
Well, you went through your own at a similar age, so I'm sure
yeah,
you knew what that had to have been for her. Yeah.
yeah. So then, fast forward 20 years, and my kids got me a DNA test so we could figure out what are we? Are we German? Are we Irish? It was always this big joke of we don't know the heritage side. So they got me a DNA test and I took it. Even then, I really didn't connect how that was going to change things.
Right.
But it changed everything. Um, and so the day the test results came in, um, I remember going home and us like all decide guessing what we think we are, and are we Irish or German? But right away when I opened it, the first thing I saw was that my biological mother and her daughter had done a DNA test, and I had the match. And I remember just like totally unexpected. It was like the last thing I thought that she would have done was get a DNA test.
And
If
you had a
she,
sister,
Especially with her daughter, then the
right?
risk of, okay, now she's gonna know.
and I just went into panic mode
Yeah.
and sent her a message in Ancestry saying, "Hey, I don't know if your family knows, but just letting you know I'm on here." And, you know, wasn't trying to do anything, but your kids are going to know.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if they didn't know. I didn't know what they knew.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give her a warning. I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything forever. And then, but immediately went into that private investigator mode because she had done this, I could sort out father's side,
Oh.
which was not an option before.
Mm-hmm.
And so spent just hours digging, days digging, and I got to my grandmother's cousin on my dad's side. She lived in Louisiana, and I could get as close to her, knew I was related, but I didn't know how. And so I sent her a message and just told her what I knew, where I was born, that I was put up for adoption, what year it was, and if did she have any idea who I could talk to. And she sent me to my grandmother. She knew right away that it
Oh.
had to be talk to her. And turned out that my grandmother had two boys, so it was one of them. And did all my search on my own, just searching these people out, and one of her sons was closer to my mother's age, and so I wrote him a letter. And within a few days, I was at work and I got a phone call, and he called me right up. Um, and I don't know, I wasn't prepared for it. I think I didn't expect it because of how it went with my mother. Um, and we had a great conversation. He said, in the letter, I told him who I was and who my biological mother was. And I don't know if you're the right person, but if you are, give me a call. And he did. And he knew right away.
Yeah.
His story um, was that him and my mother dated in high school for the first part of the school year, and then broke up before the winter break. And then he had heard that she was pregnant, but they had been broken up for several months. And in high school days, that was, a long
A
time.
lifetime, yeah.
But he did know it was an option, but he didn't know, right? And they lived in a very, very small town.
And
And
she never connected him, called him, did any of that.
mm, and so he did go and talk to her dad,
Oh,
and told her dad that it was possible that he heard that she was pregnant, but he hadn't seen her. Like, she disappeared, right? Um, and so the dad told him to stay away, you know,
yeah.
just and then a few months later went to Vietnam.
Mm,
Um, and he never saw her again. He knew that the baby got adopted out, but he didn't know for sure if it was his or not. He just knew it was a good
Yeah.
possibility. So it wasn't a huge shock to him when I contacted him.
Yeah. He's
Uh,
responsible, like even going to the fathers, he's calling you back. It's shocking sometimes because people don't always think of the father side, right? And
right.
so many
It
fathers end
wasn't
up
even,
being this way. Yeah.
yeah, it was such a big surprise to me. And um,
where was he living at this? So he went off to Vietnam. So did my father. I know how that must have affected him. It must have
yeah,
not been good.
it wasn't good.
Nobody really came back from that war in a
No.
good headspace.
No.
Nope. And he was similar. He did not come in a good headspace. He had a lot of substance abuse for
My
many
dad
years
too.
after.
Yeah.
Um, he married and divorced and had kids, and but he eventually got clean, and he was clean when I met him for 25
Oh,
years. Um, but yeah, it very much still affected him.
Yeah.
His whole life was altered by that event.
hmm
But yeah, what a
So you met him, you just dropped it, and you had siblings.
it's
And where was
siblings.
he living at this point?
He was in the eastern part of Oregon. So I was on the western side and he was on the eastern side. Um, so he had asked if he could come and meet me, and he came and picked me up. He met my kids, and then we decided to take a drive. At the time I was living about an hour from the coast. And so we decided to take a drive out to the coast and get some lunch and just talk, and get to know each other, just him and I. And I was like crazy nervous. I remember being just absolutely tripped out by the whole thing. Just, and he was too. We both were. We were just both like, how do you do this? We didn't know anybody that had met or had this situation. We didn't know how, like, what does this make us? What does this mean now?
Yeah.
Um, but
And
he
did
was
he tell
very
your
open.
siblings about you?
Yeah, so he did tell. So I have a half sister um, and a half brother, but he also raised another boy that was his child. So it wasn't biologically related to me. So he told the half brother, though, he didn't have contact with. It was a child he had right when he came back from the war, and he had a divorce, and he never did have a reunion with that child. But he very much was part of the other kids' lives. Um, he was really protective of everyone knowing in his family, but his immediate family knew right away. So he didn't want a bunch of gossip or drama because they had a big family and he didn't know really how this was going to play out. And he was trying to protect our little bubble at first, which was something we had to walk around. The way he interacted with people, he was a very private man. So this was a big deal.
Yeah.
And he wanted to include me, but he also wanted to kind of contain it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so after that very first meeting, um, at the time too, both of our lives were really crazy. So my oldest son developed schizophrenia at
Ah,
20.
gosh.
And we were about 8 years, maybe 5 to 8 years into that illness. As far as my life was very much, I worked and I took care of my son, and my other son helped me take care of my son. And that was our life. And we were doing pretty well at maintaining that, but it was very difficult. And he was going through a divorce. He'd been married for 30 years, and it was a really difficult, ugly divorce. And so he was going through a really hard transitional period in his life, too. Um, and so we both kind of came into it at that mindset where we're both going through something really hard, but
Mm-hmm.
this was important to us. And um, but for him, he had a bunch of free time all of a sudden. He was divorced. His life was like all of a sudden opened up in a way it hadn't. And my life was very much the opposite. Um, but we made a plan to meet everybody, go meet his family. And how he wanted to do that was he came and picked me up. It was like a 5 hour drive for him to drive over, pick me up. We were going to drive to Portland, meet the boy that he raised, which was his son, but not biologically related to me. So we spent a day with his son. That evening, we drove back to his house, which was in Eastern Oregon. And we spent 2 days in his kitchen sharing every single bit of our lives and our stories and just trying to get to know each other. It was like the coolest thing and the weirdest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Just like I met him once and then I'm staying at his house and part of his world. And I
Yeah.
don't even think at the time, like, um, I think about it a lot now, but I wish then I was further in the process of
Right.
understanding all that I do now, to really appreciate what was happening.
Yeah.
Um,
And where was your half sister receptive and
so she was dying to meet me and talk to me, but he was trying to keep that at bay. He wanted me and him to have a little bit of time. She lived in the same town he lived in. And so, yes, she was receptive. She had kids. And so, after the 2 days of us just spending time together, we went and spent a day at her house with her family. And then his sister came into town to meet me. And then his mother, so my grandmother, was
Wow.
alive still. She lived a few hours away they where I was conceived and where they
Oh,
grew up is where she still lived. So we spent a day and drove out to her house, was able to go into the house where he grew up and drive around the little town and see where my mother lived and their high school. And
wait, so your mother was still in this town as far as you knew?
no,
Oh,
she
okay.
she had moved. He had never seen her again, but she had moved a few hours away. I knew where she lived,
okay.
but she was a few hours away.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she's not involved in anything yet still. Okay. But how did you feel with your father's family? Like
It was
related? That's
I think with my father and I right away, it was that immediate connection, that immediate comfort, that immediate, like I felt like for the first time protected. Like he was very protective of me. He was the first time like sharing all of the stories of everything that happened, seeing it from his perspective
Mm.
was something that was really difficult for me because at that time I lived in this little bubble. Well, yeah, I had these issues in my childhood, but I still felt like I had a pretty normal life, but like seeing it from his perspective of my
Yeah.
child went to this home and
Yeah.
this is what happened, um, was difficult for me to see. I Yeah, he was great. He was a difficult personality and so was I, and we were both going through a lot, but I will cherish it forever. He passed away a few years later.
Mm.
Um, and but yeah, we got that trip. I got to see him a few more times. He wanted more. He wanted to get together like every weekend, every minute he could, because it felt like he was like trying to make up lost time.
Yeah.
And my life was so crazy that I wasn't able to sustain that type of commitment with everything I had going on. And we ended up getting into an argument. And I look at it now, and um, we got into an argument, and it blew up, and we both didn't talk to each other. And then he ended up getting sick and passed away with
Oh,
cancer. And
Mm.
I
sorry.
do feel though I'm still close with his mother. His mother's still alive. I'm going to see her in just a couple weeks.
Oh.
And his brother I had not met during that whole reunion. His brother lived in Idaho and knew about me, but I had not met him because he just was 8-10 hours away. But when he passed away, his brother came out to where I lived and told me what happened and met me, and we've been really close ever since, his brother and I, and his mom. I
And
don't
what about your sister?
I
And,
don't
and
really have contact with her.
Oh.
She knows that I'm close with my grandma and my uncle, but and she's like she gets the updates and stuff, but she was really protective of her dad, and when her and I had the argument and then he passed away, I know it hurt him and it hurt me, and she was trying to protect him. Um, and then we just never we I reached out to her several times, but we just never have
Mm.
been able to um,
get past it.
get past it. Yeah, we just never got past it, and I didn't know how. Right, I didn't know.
Right.
I was trying to be careful always,
Of
and I
course.
didn't want to overstep. My grandmother and my uncle have been completely open, and we talk every couple weeks.
I love that.
Um,
And she may come around one day. Like life is long in that way.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
I,
I think
I
she's still dealing with, losing her dad.
Yeah.
She was
hasn't been that long, really, has it?
no. Mm-mm.
Um, I do have a question. So you did your DNA, your mother pops up, your siblings pop up.
Oh
Did
my
that go
gosh.
anywhere?
Yeah.
Did the
So yeah.
siblings? Okay.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, that was an absolute disaster.
Oh no.
So I had sent her a message to warn her, right? And never did hear back from her. But then I got an email from her daughter saying, "Hey,
Who are you?
um,
This says we're sisters.
Yeah.
you are either my cousin, my first cousin, which they had one aunt, um, or you're our sister." And like wanted me to like engage. And I sent my mother another message because at that point, then I realized they didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I sent her another message, and the only way I had to contact her was through this ancestry place website. She didn't respond. And so then I got another message from the sister saying, "Okay, we know you're our sister, and we want
They had
to."
talked to her. They had talked to
Well,
her.
they hadn't.
Oh,
They had just figured it out by their own.
yeah.
I'm not even sure exactly, but they figured out and said that they had process of elimination. They figured out that yes, you are our sister. There's two sisters and a brother. Um, she said that they were all going to talk to their mom, um, but their mom had not told them. And so they were going to have a conversation with their mom. And so because they had told me this in this email, I responded back. I said, I'm going to respect your mom's wishes. She did not want to have contact with me. And so until she wants that, I just wanted to be respectful. And they said that they were going to have a conversation with her. Um, I don't know, a month went by, which was forever in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and I got a message from my biological mother that
Mm.
said she signed a contract and I am stalking her, basically.
Deepen her trauma with this thing.
Deepening her trauma with this thing.
Yeah.
In my mind, I felt like the kids talked to her. It was like a month after I heard from them, they were going to all sit down and have a conversation with her. And then I got that message. So I replied and explained that I'm not trying to do anything. And in fact, I was trying to warn you and, that they may find out. And they reached out to me. And in the meantime, I'm in a reunion with my dad, right? Having the best time of like learning about all that, right? And I did learn more about her through him. Um, but I just replied back, just letting my sister know that I can't reach out to her. And I told my mom in the email, I'm sorry that your kids found out this way. I told them that you didn't want to have contact and I apologized, right? Well, the kids had not talked to her yet, so she
Oh.
didn't know her
Oh.
kids knew. So I like further,
Whoosh. Yeah.
it just felt like an absolute disaster. That's the last I've ever heard from them. I
Really?
feel
So
like,
the kids never reached back out to you. This was what year? Like 2018, 2019?
yeah, yeah, around there. Um, I feel like I've always felt they were very receptive, the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And what I do remember is one of the sisters telling me that it explained a lot about their mom
Mm-hmm.
and some of the stuff that they've dealt with her, that this was something that she went through.
Yeah.
And I feel like when she passes, we'll have a reunion. But
Yeah.
until then, we're all respecting her wishes,
Mm.
is
It's
how,
sad. It's like lost time, you know, for these siblings that would like to know you probably, and you'd like to know them.
yeah. Yeah. With social media, I go on and stalk them every once in a
Of
while
course.
and I can see their faces and see their kids' faces and see that resemblance and stuff. But yeah,
And are they in the area, like in Oregon?
no, they're like in California and spread out. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And
So,
how are your kids doing now? And did this
Yeah.
give them some answers? And that's a rough
yeah.
ride that you've gone through. And
Yes.
Yeah, so my youngest son is great. He's doing great. He's 30s in his 30s now, so getting older and it's fun. It's a fun stage, to be a parent of, an adult past their 20s. Um, my oldest son passed away 3 years
Oh,
ago.
oh,
yeah.
Michelle, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. And that was the beginning of me really. I was in reunion and I was searching this whole time but it was a very isolated, like I didn't talk to people about this. It wasn't
Right.
a space, right? Even with I've heard you guys talk about it in your other episodes where it's like even when I did talk about it with someone, it was this weird uncomfortableness of,
Right.
like, well, wouldn't your mom feel bad or, like that you're looking or,
Always.
yeah. And even with like, so when I did have my reunion with my dad, all the searching I did, I was never open with that with my mom that raised
I
me.
wondered that. Oh, she's still alive. And
She is still alive. And I never was open with her about it because I never felt like it was comfortable. It would hurt her. Even though she told me I was okay always, I just never was until I was about to meet my dad. So even once I had a few conversations over the phone and stuff, I didn't tell her until I actually made a plan to meet him, because then I felt like, okay, now she has to know.
Right.
Um, and it was a huge deal for me to tell her. And I just, again, at the time was protecting her, right? This is the biggest thing I felt like I ever am going to go through, is to meet my biological father, and I'm protecting her like the whole time. Like I was so worried about it.
Yeah.
And she asked a lot of questions. She said the words like, I'm happy for you. She said all the right things, but I could feel the tension.
Yeah.
And my mom is the most nosy person about my life. She wants to know every little thing, and she'll ask me it over and over and over, but she never asked me about that again.
Yeah. It's like
Like,
it's like an affair. Yeah, I had that too with my parents. Like they were interested, but don't bring it up.
don't bring it up. And I remember shortly after
Mhm.
I met him, it was my mom's birthday, and our whole family went to do like a big camp out for her birthday weekend. And I was told not to bring it up that weekend,
By
because it's
other
her
people.
birthday. Because she didn't want me to talk
Oh,
about it
she.
because it was her birthday.
Right.
Um, so it wasn't something she knew at that point. After he passed away, she felt like she could talk about it, like he was no longer a threat, kind of
Mhm.
feeling. Like she would ask me things every once in a while, um, but yeah, this coming out of the fog really happened by counseling after Josh passed away. I really dug into, healing from all of these things and trying to pick up the pieces. And for me, this the adoption was a big piece of it, but I didn't know. It was a big piece of it because of meeting my dad, because of him passing away, or because of all these little pieces, but not necessarily the first trauma, not,
Right.
the separation, not. It wasn't until I was in counseling for a while that I started connecting some of those pieces myself. And I stumbled across your podcast, and just deep dived, got the
Ah,
books, was watching every single thing coming out of the fog with you guys as well, and started asking more questions, wanting answers, not wanting the fairy tale story I had been told, and the silence around it anymore, being okay to be okay with it. Like I was tired of protecting it. And I think there was a shift in me when Josh died. It was like a second primal wound,
yeah. Of
Sure.
course.
I was done. I was pissed. I was tired of the lies. I was tired of protecting them.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel bad for my mom that raised me during that time, because I remember her being like, "Where is this coming from?" Like all of a
Yeah.
sudden I wanted answers, and I wanted to understand what really happened. And I ordered my court records, um, from the county. I didn't even know that was an option until I watched one of your episodes, and
Oh,
I think, Sarah, were
It
saying
was
like
me.
you,
Yeah.
yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh,"
Petitioned the court and got all
I'm
the
like,
Right.
"I
one
didn't even
redacted.
know
Yeah.
I could do that." And so I went to do the same thing, and it turned out in Oregon I could, but I didn't even know to even
Yeah.
ask, right? And I got these court records, and it just made me have more questions. And the day I went to go pick up my records, I went to the home where I thought I was at the whole time. I was told I was adopted out of Albertina Kerr, which is at the time was a big adoption clinic. But they just facilitated the adoption. But they
Oh,
also, in years prior to that, had nurseries and had babies that were in and out of their facility. So, but my mother was sent to it was a Salvation Hospital, Salvation Army type hospital. I'm trying to remember, White House or something, like, not White House. It was called something specific, but it's where the mothers were sent until they gave birth, and then I was in the hospital with her for a week, and then she left, and I went to Albertina Kerr. I was relinquished to them.
Okay.
I had always thought that she went to Albertina Kerr and had been
Mm.
there, and that's where it all happened. But this is the story I created from not knowing.
Of course.
So I went to Albertina Kerr demanding all my records. And they didn't have any records really, right? Because they just facilitated the paperwork. They didn't, they never had custody of me. I was in foster care. They really just facilitated the paperwork for the adoption. Um, but it, through all the little bits and pieces of papers I could get, I was able to then request the paperwork from where she was. Um, and just kind of piece little bits together, right? Just what I could. And, it's not much different than I knew, but at least I knew where I was born. I knew
Yeah.
where she went and how all the players took place. The people that raised me, mother that raised me, her cousin was the lawyer
Mm.
for the adoption. Um, My one of the cousins in that family, one of my cousins in that family was also adopted. She had also went through her own process to find out who her biological family was, and she believes that my grandpa, my mom's dad, knew her dad from a baseball team, and that
What?
the cousin facilitated the paperwork, and it was just a private adoption.
Hence the not checking in the home and all that. What's going on?
And the same cousin ended up getting somebody pregnant and sent them off to California to have their baby and put up that baby for adoption.
Wow.
So like learning all those things at the same time of coming out of the fog, it really made me angry. It made me
Yeah.
angry about the whole process and not really.
Coming out of the fog is kind of like the
Oh,
stages of grief, right?
yeah.
You go through
Yeah,
all those feelings, anger and grief, and
Yeah.
finally
Depression.
acceptance, and really,
yeah.
truly,
It is.
I'm glad now that, like, at the time when I signed up, it was months ago when I signed up for this interview, and I remember thinking, "Oh my goodness, it's not gonna be till May, that's a long time from now." I'm glad
It's
now because I'm
crazy.
not right in the middle of that. I've had time to just accept, like you said, this is what happened, and knowing
Yeah.
it is freeing, and it's helped me more than I can ever explain, this space that you
Yeah.
guys provide us to learn, right? Like, because no one else has taught us. No one has
No.
showed us why we
mm,
feel this way.
yeah, it's really remarkable. Thank you so much
Gosh.
for sharing all this. You've been through a
A
lot, and
lot.
Uh,
it would be easy to just sort of want to hide from it all instead of facing it, but there is no way out until you go through. So,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, and I think you guys are helping a lot of people that,
Thank you.
I think we all go through. You've talked about substance abuse or issues, relationships, or, that isolation we feel, suicide, all those things that
Yeah.
adoptees go through. Um, we all just think we're crazy until there's a
Yeah.
space for us to realize
right.
we're not, right? Because no one talks about it. No one,
No, and you get that what you talked about, that look of like, oh, it's just your whole life. Even just they picked you out with a bunch of babies in the room. You
oh, I
believe
did,
these
all
stories.
my
It's crazy.
during the fog got a little messy, but I got all the paperwork from my mom. I asked her for
Yeah.
all the paperwork she had before I ordered it from the courts, and one of them was a receipt,
Weird.
$500,
Huh?
by the way. That's how much it cost.
With inflation, you'd be $80,000 right now,
Just to make you feel better.
At the
especially
very
these days. It'd be even more, probably.
at the very same time, so I got the paperwork, I had the receipts and all the stuff that it just sat so uncomfortable
Oh,
with
it's
me.
so uncomfortable, isn't it?
It was so uncomfortable, and at the same time, my parents' dog that they had for, like, 20 years passed away, and I went to go up to see, they live a few hours from me, so I went up to go see him, and she was wanting to get another dog, And so we went to this event, and this was right in the middle of me coming out of the fog and getting my paperwork and reading these books and asking some hard questions. And um, the event we went to pick out our dog was like all foster parents that were fostering dogs. Bring your dogs to this little doggy daycare place
Yeah.
and put them in this little room, and then the people that want to adopt them can come in and pick them out. And it was the story that she had told me of my right, but it was with dogs.
You're like, wait a second.
It was, and you know, it
Yeah.
was around the same cost too, right? It was around
my
$500,
God.
and it was just like,
It's an
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Thank you for being so vulnerable. Like you've really told us a lot, and I think there's a listener out there who's going to relate.
yeah,
Either
Of
somebody
course,
who
yeah.
needs this, right?
Every story. Yeah.
yeah. I really appreciate your guys' time and letting me do this.
Yeah, what a
Wonderful.
so much there, and thank you for sharing, and I'm really glad you're
Yeah.
doing as well as you are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
So,
healing, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
That's what
healing.
we do.
Always a continual process of healing. So,
And you guys are a big part of that for us, so thank you.
thank you, Michelle.
Thank
All
You
right,
guys are a big part of
Right?
that for us too.
Yeah,
So
good.
we're in
goes
the
both
same boat.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle.
All
Thank
right,
you.
bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was such a heavy story
Yeah.
on every level. I mean, what the things people endure is
Right.
just
I
it's
mean,
just sometimes really hard. And
yeah.
yet here she is, like healing
Yeah.
and positive attitude and
Yeah, she's really strong.
hmm
Really strong. Just
very.
her journey and losing her son, that just was I
Uh,
was like, whoosh,
I know that was,
been through big stuff.
and the adoptive father. Once
Oh,
again, here we are hearing
we
these
just talked
stories of
about them.
abuse. We were just talking about it, and well, because uh, one of the books we read
Yeah.
talked about this in foster care and all that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
just
and not vetting the house, right? Her saying
not
that the lawyer,
betting the house.
yep.
I mean,
Because if they had asked that aunt, oh, how would he be as a father?
right.
They would have heard.
I mean, honestly, these days that it is harder to adopt a dog. They will do
Yeah.
I remember a friend
Right.
of mine adopted in LA and they did multiple home
Yeah.
visits for the dog,
They came and visited us with Gracie
and
3
got
times.
references
Yeah,
for,
references. We had to provide
everything.
a lot.
Adoptive parents didn't need any references
No.
back then. You want a baby? Here it is.
Yeah, Gracie
No
was
strings
a lot
attached.
of things we had to do to jump through those hoops.
Seriously. Well,
Yeah,
she was incredible and
she was.
yeah. So,
Appreciate
well,
our listeners.
yeah. What do we say, Louise?
Another great episode.
Another great episode. See you next time.
See you next time.